Sometimes a company, just like a house, needs a serious makeover. And I'm not talking about just a fresh coat of paint. I mean a complete, down-to-the-studs structural overhaul to stay competitive and, well, profitable. So let's grab our hard hats and explore the whole world of corporate restructuring. So here's what we're going to do. First, we'll get into why a company even needs a makeover in the first place. Then, we'll open up the toolkit and see what our options are. After that, we'll dive into the big ideas that drive these deals, the super important investigation that has to happen beforehand, and finally, how you can tell if the whole thing was actually a success. All right, so let's kick things off with the big question. Why on earth would a company go through all this trouble? What's the real motivation behind such a massive change? I mean, really think about that. When the numbers are heading south, when the market completely shifts under your feet, or when growth just grinds to a halt, what is the next move? It's a huge high-stakes problem that, let's be honest, every leader is going to face at some point. And this, right here, is the strategic answer. Corporate restructuring. It's the formal game plan for reorganizing a company's entire structure. And the goal, well, it's pretty simple. Make the company more efficient, more profitable, and ultimately boost its value for the long haul. Now, what's so interesting here is the sheer range of reasons. See, it's not always about a crisis. Sometimes it's pure ambition. A company wants to achieve massive growth or get those famous synergy benefits. But other times, yeah, it's about survival, slashing costs, or pulling out of a financial nosedive. No matter the reason, though, the end game is always the same: maximize wealth for the shareholders. Okay, so a company has decided it needs a change. What are the actual tools they can use to pull off this big makeover? Let's open up that toolkit and see what's inside. First up, we've got the merger. This is where two companies basically agree to join forces and become one totally new company. The key idea here is partnership. They're combining their strengths, hoping to build something new and better together. Then you've got the acquisition. Now this is a little different. Here, one company, usually the bigger one, goes out and buys a controlling stake in another. So it's less of a partnership and really more of a takeover. The company that gets acquired just becomes part of the buyer's organization. And this just nails the difference, doesn't it? A merger is all about combination, creating something new from two equals. An acquisition, on the other hand, is about control, with one company basically absorbing another. It's a simple distinction, but an absolutely crucial one. But hey, restructuring isn't always about getting bigger. Sometimes it's about getting smaller and more focused. That's a demerger. It's when a company spins off one of its divisions into a completely separate new company. This lets the parent company really zero in on its main business. And you know what? It can often unlock a ton of hidden value in that part they just spun off. Now that we've seen the tools, let's look at the blueprint. I mean, it's one thing to know what these things are, but it's a whole other thing to understand the strategic thinking, the really big ideas that push executives to actually use them. Okay, so the most famous and definitely the most optimistic idea is the synergy theory. This is the core belief that when you combine two companies, the result is going to be way more valuable than just adding their individual values together. You're hoping to create something bigger, better, and a whole lot more efficient. This is the absolute perfect way to think about it. You're not just adding two companies together. You're trying to unlock some kind of third element of value through saving costs, boosting revenues, or just having more power in the market. This right here, this is the holy grail of mergers and acquisitions. But there's a dark side. It's called the hubris theory. And it suggests that sometimes these massive deals aren't driven by logic at all, but by pure ego. It's what happens when managers get so overconfident that they think they can make any deal work, which leads them to overestimate the benefits and, here's the killer part, overpay. And that just gets right to the heart of the problem, doesn't it? Hubris is that really fine line where confidence crosses over into dangerous arrogance. And it often ends with disastrous financial consequences for the company and, yep, its shareholders. So, to avoid that hubris trap and to make sure that synergy is even possible, you have got to do your homework. Come on, you wouldn't buy a house without getting an inspection, right? Well, you definitely shouldn't buy a whole company without one either. That all-important inspection is called due diligence. It is an absolutely critical, deep dive investigation into every single aspect of the company you're thinking of buying. The main goal? Uncover any hidden risks and just verify that everything the company claims about itself is actually true. And believe me, this process is incredibly thorough. On the legal side, you're digging through contracts and looking for any potential lawsuits. Financially, you're tearing apart the balance sheets to get to the real numbers. And operationally, you're assessing how the business actually runs day to day and, just as important, the quality of its team. So here's the bottom line. Skipping or rushing due diligence is just corporate malpractice. It is the single best way to find any skeletons in the closet, to make sure you're paying a fair price, and to prevent that dream deal from turning into a total financial nightmare. All right, the deal is done. The dust has finally settled. So how do we actually know if the corporate makeover was a hit? How do we score its success? Well, one of the best tools for this is something called economic value added, or EVA for short. Now, unlike simple accounting profit, EVA is designed to measure the true economic profit of a company. And it does that by taking into account the full cost of all the capital it uses. Okay, I know this formula on the screen can look a bit like alphabet soup, but the idea behind it is actually really simple. That first part, NOPAT, that's basically the pure profit the business earned from its operations. Think of it as the money coming in. Then you subtract the cost of all the money the company had to use to make that profit. That's the second part of the equation. It's kind of like the fee you have to pay for using cash from your investors and lenders. So really, EVA just asks one question. After you pay for all the money you used, is there any actual profit left over? And the answer couldn't be clearer. If your EVA is positive, hey, congratulations. You've created real value for your shareholders. Thumbs up. But if it's negative, well, the makeover was a failure. You've actually destroyed value. It is the ultimate financial report card. Which brings us to our final big question. We've seen the toolkit, we've talked about the theories, and we've even looked at the scorecards. The path to a successful restructuring seems pretty clear, right? So why is it that in the real world, study after study shows that the vast majority of mergers and acquisitions actually fail to deliver on that promise of creating value? Now that's something to think about.